Hi, everyone, and welcome to Marketing Corner, episode 78, coming to you live from Malmö.
Yay!
Woo! And we have a super, super special guest, the man who literally wrote the book on product-led growth. Mr. Wes Bush is with us.
Hey!
Whee!
Thanks for having me.
Soundboard.
It's almost working.
It's almost. So, hi.
Hello.
It's great to meet you. So we're both speaking at Sassius, so I thought it'd be a really great time to sit down with you on the pod, as we say, and pick your brains about everything PLG. So, yeah, you're up for it.
Awesome. I'm game.
You're
Let's
game.
do it.
So I thought, as I kind of mentioned in the intro, you wrote a book on product-led growth. It's kind of your jam. You're the product-led growth guy. So why don't you introduce yourselves to some of our listeners?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start off like back before PLG, because how I kind of fell into the world of PLG, I was working with these B2B SaaS companies. All of them were sales led. Mm-hmm. And so the only way they could sell was with their sales team. And so I was in marketing and doing demand generation for these companies. And I was trying to get leads for their sales team. And so I was spending hundreds of thousands of dollars promoting these white papers and guides. And at the end of these white papers, it was always like, now sign up for a demo of Vidyard or whatever. And you're
about to say bullshit, right?
And I would always just like scratch my head and be like, isn't there a better way?
Yeah.
I honestly don't buy products like this.
No.
And so it's just like, okay, I think there's a better way. And then we launched this free trial at Vidyard, thinking like, this is going to be a great idea and everything. And we slapped on a 14-day free trial. Mm-hmm. Surprise, surprise, it bombed. Like it didn't work. Yeah. We noticed we had a lot more signups for it, but it was cannibalizing the sales team.
Right.
And it didn't really have much thought or strategy into it. And so luckily, we just like decided, okay, let's like kill that off. And then 6 months later, we were like, okay, we got the product-led munchies again.
It happens. Yeah.
Let's try it again. And we had an insight from that free trial where it was like, hey, nobody uploaded a video. So like, could we make that easy? And so we did. We introduced this free product, simple Chrome extension. People could do that. And that's basically took off. Like we had 100,000 people use it in the first year, then millions have used it now. And so it was really kind of the difference between like, first time PLG did not work. Yep. Second time it did work. And then since that point, I've been like hooked on the fact of, hey, there's this old school kind of more traditional way of growing a company, and then there's your product-led way. And I've been pro product-led ever since, just because I've seen how much easier it is to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But I find it super interesting also because like and some other companies, without mentioning a bunch of them out there, but they would probably have stopped after the first test, right?
Yes.
Like totally have stopped after the first one and be like, okay, guys, we're done. We've tried this. We're not going to do it again.
Yep.
Yeah. Probably cost some money and whatever, right? And then how did you convince them to do the second time? I think that's my question.
Yeah. So that second time, what we had to kind of come up with is like, well, why didn't it work?
Yeah.
And so I remember I was like booking meetings with like the leadership team. And I'm like, hey, like there's some like very clear problems here. One, there's no onboarding. There's no like support. We're not launching experiments to improve this. There was no strategy behind it. And so that was like the big thing we had to kind of discuss and like, okay, how is this going to change? Because I think a lot of people think it's just a different go-to-market motion, but it is a go-to-market motion, but it is also a complete company shift as well. Yeah. And there's the mindset, there's the culture, there's the capabilities you need to build around it. And so that's really what we switched at that second time.
And how did you get, a lot of our listeners, right, the getting the buy-in, getting everyone on board. I mean, there's a lot of friction. Maybe sales, for example, are pushing back. Sometimes product, it's, at least in my experience, it tends to be maybe a marketing wish of like, we want to try to do something free. Can you build us this? Or maybe that's not, I know you're not necessarily a marketing background person, but how do you get that buy-in? How do you get product to change their roadmap? How do you get sales to say, yeah, sure. Let's give it away for free and replace us. That's the kind of fear that a lot of salespeople have, I find.
Yeah.
Did you come against that? And what did you do?
Absolutely. Like you will bump up against that. Any company will. But the core thing I always like to start off with, this is like one of those first 9 components of like how to build and scale a product-led business. First one was just like, what is your company level strategy? How does this connect to it? And so a lot of times companies that approach it very surface level, we'll just slap on that free trial. And that's exactly what we did too. And then it's like, oh, it's not working. PLG must not work. Let's like kill it.
Yeah. Sounds familiar.
And so very common. We usually come in at that time.
Hang in there. Hang in there, like, everyone. Yeah.
Okay, work with us. Give it a second shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, the company level strategy, it's like has to connect to how is this going to help your company win?
Mm-hmm.
And so what we always break down is like, okay, how are you going to win? Do you have like 2 or 3 moats that you're going to build as a business that are actually hard to copy? So a lot of times for companies in the software space, it's like, okay, what would make it hard for somebody to compete with you? And a lot of times, not always, but like one of those answers might be like user and customer experience. We got to make it the easiest thing since sliced bread to do this.
Yeah.
And so because a lot of SaaS is not new, it's like it's existed in the enterprise tech space for a while. It's just like, how do we bring it to these smaller, medium-sized businesses and kind of expand there? So that would be an example where it's like we introduced PLG without even labeling it PLG. And then we're like, now how do we do that? We need to build the right capabilities to support that. So where does that stand for our current like user experience? Do we have like really great people in that specific regard? How are we going to deliver that user experience and make it incredible? And so when you work that way, it really opens up the kimono of PLG without calling it PLG, because I think back to your question of like the resistance, I think, yeah, there is usually a lot of resistance from sales initially of like, hey, this is going to cannibalize my deal flow. And it's like, yes, but if it's done wrong,
yeah, exactly.
Which the likelihood if you don't install it right is high. So it's a valid concern.
Yeah. Cool.
No, it makes a lot of sense. How do you like so one of the things like I think a lot of people have the tendency to sometimes not understand PLG. So in your words, what's the difference between PLG and sales led? Like if it's just like completely back to basics, like what is PLG and fundamentals? Because I think we all get it here in the room, but I just want to make sure everyone else agrees. And maybe you also have a different definition than the rest of us.
Yeah. And so for your audience, Joe, I'll give you like 2 really quick stories and you'll see the difference.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Because they both have free trials.
Yeah.
which should be fun. So first example, chess.com.
Yes, I play a lot of chess.
I saw you playing chess
I was
today.
playing chess earlier.
I was like,
You told me you were working. You told me you were working,
I was working, but I was taking a break.
Yeah.
Okay, quick story. So I was sitting in a coffee shop and I hadn't actually noticed Wes was also sitting there. And then I played a game of chess. Yeah, anyways, sorry.
Yes, so chess.com, great app. And I signed up for it. And within like a couple of minutes, I was playing with somebody in India halfway across the world. And I was like, oh, this is like a competitive game. It's amazing. And it kept coming back to this app. And then I eventually upgraded. Now, there's this other company called PitchBook. And so I was interested in companies that were recently acquired. And they have a great database on that. So I was like, oh, you got a free trial. Sweet. Let me sign up for it. It's like one of those request a free trial options. And then I signed up for that. And it was literally just a sales call. It's like, okay, can we hop on a sales call and go through this? I was like, oh, okay, that's different. So back to your question, like what is the one biggest thing between like sales-led, product-led companies? It comes down to how you sell is just as important as what you sell. So in a sales-led company, the motion works like there's these 3 things that go on. There's like, we acquire you. So we get you to our website, then we kick off the monetization of how can we convert you as a customer, and then we engage you and deliver that value. So the biggest difference is in a product-led company, it's literally like you still got to get people to your site, you got to acquire them, but then you engage them, you provide that value, provide that experience of, oh, wow, like I got tangible value from this product. Makes sense. Then you monetize. So I wanted to share that example because it's like you can still have a free trial and be more sales led because even at Vidyard, our first free trial, it was like literally just that.
Yeah.
Because
it's like, can sales contact? Yeah, sure.
And I think that leads me to the next, because this is a great example, but at Vidyard, there's a sales team, right?
Yeah,
exactly. Right. So this is a version where, because I think a lot of people, when they think product-led growth, they think no salespeople.
Yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Right? Like
including salespeople, especially salespeople.
Especially salespeople,
that's where the
like,
resistance comes from.
Yeah. But that's not, most of them are not like that, right? Like,
For us, for example, at Anamundo, we launched a free trial purposely to give our sales team the opportunity to focus on those more complex deals, right? They shouldn't be spending their time on these tiny deals that just can just happen. So we want to elevate them to kind of make sure that the easy stuff is taken care of so they can focus on the more complex. And that's the kind of what we're trying to get them to understand, to get that buy-in, which is it's starting to work. The tides are starting to change a little bit where they see the benefit. Yeah.
Totally. And when that does work, sales becomes the biggest advocate for it.
Yeah.
Because they're like, oh man, I don't have to spend all my time on those small deals. Like it's fantastic. Why didn't we do this earlier?
Yeah, exactly. And we found with our free trial, 51% of people who finish it become a paying customer. So of course that's where like the sales team are kind of waiting for those deals to kind of hit the end of the free trial, because then those conversion rates are so much easier or so much higher, and those conversations are going to be a lot easier because they've had success, they've enjoyed the product. And I think that's letting the product sell itself, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the scary part too, but it's like it has to be true for it to work, where it's like your product-led motion has to be good enough where it can sell itself. People can upgrade in that smaller like size business bucket and get to value, do everything on their own. But then it's like, okay, where do you introduce sales? And that's the fun question of like, well, maybe if it's a bigger company, they're going to need that help with the champion and support. And it's like, as long as they're providing value. So then the question becomes, when you think about where do we use sales, it's like, are they adding value or friction? And if it's just adding friction, it's like, let's remove that. Let's make the product do that. But if it's adding value, it's like, it's doing something the product can't. Then I'll give you another example. It's not sales, but it's support. So one of our clients, keep.com, they were trying to understand, like, how do we scale our product-led motion? And so they were like, I don't know if like completely self-serve is going to work for them. And so they are like a business automation tool. And so they noticed a lot of people, small, medium-sized businesses, would set up an account. They'd automate some useless crap in their company. And then they wouldn't find a ton of value out of it. So they actually started introducing free onboarding coaching sessions. And so they would have a session with them and then they would help them find a process that would actually provide a lot of value in their business. And then they would automate that. And then their retention went through the roof because people were just hooked. They're like, oh, this is already like, it's already paid for itself with this one automation and I can do all these others. Fantastic. And so, it's like a really interesting thing to think about. There's these like, when you're thinking about how do we introduce people into the equation, there's these 3 layers for your product that I always like breaking down like a cake. The first one's like your product layer, which is like, okay, everything in the product, can we like guide people through it? Then there's your knowledge layer, which is, does this person, are they missing anything? Any knowledge that might prevent them from seeing success in this product? And then the last one is skill. So are they missing any skills that would prevent them from getting value? So in like the keep.com case, like absolutely, they were missing a lot of skills when it came to identifying which processes you should automate and then how to actually do that. And so onboarding coaches can be a fantastic way to just accelerate that and get them to value without like relying completely on the product, because in that case, the product was pretty easy. It was just the other skills and knowledges that was holding them back.
Interesting.
That's really cool. I think I used to work for a company called Templify. A lot of our listeners probably know that because I say it every time. But
not Templify again.
Yeah, not again. But I think one of the reasons I bring it up here is that so we were selling to, or they are still selling to, large enterprises, like really large enterprises. So it was like every time you landed an enterprise deal, it was like, 50,000 users, 10,000 users, a lot of users. So, and we tried at some point to do this like free trial and trial version, but the problem was it was so hard because like you would have to take the entire enterprise data and put into the system for it to flourish.
Right.
And so my question is kind of like, what do you do in situations with that where like you can't really showcase the product properly? Because do you have cases where that, and maybe that leads me to where does PLG work the best? I think that's kind of my next one.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So I truly believe like any business can become product led. Yeah. It's just, where does that motion start? Yeah. I'll give you an example with your situation. So in that specific instance where it's really complex, it's hard to do, all those things, like, is that the best area to roll out PLG? Probably not. Right. And so it video back to that story. You're probably now, the audience is like, oh, not that story.
No, it's great. It's great. I love Vidyor, by the way. Just shout out. Like, it's great.
They were my old competitors, so it's okay. You did a better job.
You lost. You lost to Wes.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So that initial free trial was for their like enterprise marketing analytics product. And so the like actually to get value out of the product was quite hard because you had to upload a video, then you had to like integrate it with your marketing automation platform, and then you had to put it on your site, and then you could finally actually see like, okay, did Jennifer watch the full video or not? And so it was like, it took a long time to go through that. And so what we unbundled is like, what is, if you know, like what is user success, you get really clear on what that is. I like to bucket it up into 3 groups. There's like beginner problems for those people. Those are usually the quicker things to solve. And like, they're going to bubble up early in their journey to that ultimate success. And then there's like your more intermediate related problems. Those are some that maybe that's like where they're first going to want to upgrade and like seriously start paying for this. And then there's the advanced stuff, which is like, you know, maybe that's where that product was, where it's like they might need to talk to somebody to do this. And so everything in that beginner bucket, I like to give for free and like tie it to a milestone. Like, what can this do? So for instance, for us at Product Led, it's like, I really don't want to like get anybody to pay to figure out if PLG is right for you. It's like, that should be free. That's a beginner problem. By all means, I got to do everything I can, like free Product Led fundamentals course, like anything to just help you understand, like think through it. Intermediate is like how to actually apply it, implement it into your business. Like, okay, there's a little bit of a different situation there where we provide that customized advice to help them accelerate that. And so I just approach that for the way you're thinking about it. Like maybe there's earlier problems that could be
makes so much sense.
Made free before.
And I think like we tried a lot of other things after that, so it makes a lot of sense because I remember hitting the wall on that one. I was like, okay, this is not the right way. Like
especially with enterprise.
Especially in those enterprise cases, right? Okay, cool. All right, so maybe so we kind of you talked a little bit about it, but like in a PLG strategy, like what does it like entail? Like what are the key components that need to be in place for this to be able to be a thing, in your opinion?
And I would also like to add to that, like the stakeholders, like who do you need buy-in from to take actionable, impactful steps and not just surface level bullshit.
Totally. All right. So my ears are ringing when you said components, because I'm like, oh yeah, in my book there's these 9 components. Shall I introduce them?
Yes, please. Fire away. As per chapter.
Well, we
totally not going to pluck
the first one. First one was the strategy component. So like, how does PLG align with that? You got to obviously start there. And you're going to see out of these 9 components, there's actually an order. You should follow them in this order, ideally. Second thing is the user. So do you understand who is the ideal user? A lot of companies, they don't have a good idea. They pick way too many users, or they're focused in, especially.
They just probably just pick everyone, right? Like
a lot of sales-led companies know their ICP a lot of times. Like, who's my ideal buyer?
Hopefully.
And they know the buyer, but not the user. And so like in a product-led company, you actually have to put the user first. And so that's actually a different thing.
Totally.
It's like, you got to focus on that person, understand them better than anyone else in your market. So like once you do that, you kind of break it down of like, okay, what does this user journey look like? The 6 main stages of what that looks like. And then the second or third piece is like, okay, now that we know the ideal user and their journey, what does the ideal model look like? What should we give away for free? And so when you start doing the use research for your ideal user, what we try and understand is like, what does the first strike look like for them in that product where they're going to get enough tangible value versus like, I'll tell intangible value is like, okay, they can sign up for our product, go through a demo and look through, click around, everything. Like, that's not tangible value.
No.
Tangible value is like, oh, we did something and we got a graphic or whatever out of this.
There's someone who once told me like, and then they can change colors on these things. I'm like, okay, who gives a shit?
Totally. It has to pass that who gives a shit test.
Yeah, exactly, right? Who gives a shit?
And that's an interesting point too, because a lot of times, like in our product, you know, we need data. You need to, and I have a very specific question, but I'll let you get through your components first because they're really important. But the dummy data, you know, and I know when I say dummy data, my product team just like, but it's like, well, it's quick and it's easy and you can see the value. But I guess that would be technically intangible because it doesn't apply to.
Doesn't do anything.
Totally. It's just, look, it works.
Yeah. Like the other thing is like, does it pass the Super Mario test, which is like, okay, if Super Mario picks up a flower, he can like grow 10x bigger, he spews fire, and he's like a complete badass. Now, if somebody signs up for your trial and they are the same, does not pass the Super Mario test.
I love that.
So, yeah.
Yep.
That's
Yeah,
like
that's
the
like my whole
third thing.
day.
You got to have that model that like makes people feel super in some way.
That's awesome.
And
Okay.
once you have that, the first three are just your foundational ones. The next three are all about how do you build a product that sells itself.
Mm-hmm.
And so assuming you built those three out, then you can get started. But most people start here. Since I talked to a ton of founders, they're always like, oh yeah, I just like launched it. And I'm like, oh, okay. But that foundational elements are not
I feel
there.
like personally attacked right now, Wes.
Damn it.
Yeah, exactly. It's so
Yeah.
true. Can I ask you a question? Sorry for
Yeah,
interrupting. So,
Okay.
because actually I was at a talk last week, and so there was a panel about PLG, and one of the guys actually said you can't have PLG until you've actually sold the product first. Like, so that essentially, because like he was advocating for the fact that you can't really establish, because a lot of companies, a lot of startups, right, where they go out and say, like you just said, we built this with PLG in mind. That is great, but you haven't sold it yet.
Yeah.
So they didn't really know who the buyer was and didn't
Yeah.
really know who would use it and all that stuff.
Yes.
So do you also find that a lot of the companies like you help, or maybe like they have to have, you always almost have a sales team, maybe it's just the founder in the beginning, that sell
Yeah.
it first and then it becomes PLG.
Yeah, I love that. Especially like even with some of the companies we help, like they might just do like the sales that kind of approach initially because you learn so much.
Exactly.
And if you avoid that and you don't have that product market fit, like I always look at like PLG is like it's this ultimate scalable go-to-market motion. It's like you can scale something if it's worth scaling.
Yeah.
Now, if it's not worth scaling and you don't know, don't waste your time.
That makes sense.
So it's a valid point.
Yeah. You got to
that's
be
a
able to
great
sell
point.
it. Yeah. Fair enough.
Totally.
I have so I was going to talk a little bit about a specific example, but I think other people listening might be in the same because we have a very complex technical product. My company, we work in IoT, which means that you need a physical SIM card that goes into a device, sent out in the world, and does it work? Does it send the signal?
Yep.
And so we ran up against this issue where everyone wants to test us, right? We're going against IBM, we're going against AT&T,
Right.
we're going against household names. Who are these idiots in Copenhagen? So they want to test us. So we said, let's do a free trial. But we have a technical product where we have to physically send something out to you for that free trial. And now, the finance team are going a little bit like, hey, so we're spending like $50 in postage for every trial, but only half of them turn into paying customers.
Yeah.
Do you come across sort of super complex technical products and who have a physical offering or any advice for people in that situation who may or may not remain named? Unnamed? Anonymous.
We're super good at this part.
Yeah. Edit that. No.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about that, the easiest thing initially is just can we reduce some of these costs?
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll give you another example with one of our clients. Like they were every time somebody signed up, they would create this whole new database and stuff like that. And their server costs were like really high.
Yeah.
And
Imagine
so-
that takes time too.
Yeah, it took time and everything. And so it was expensive for those trialers to sign up for free. And so I think it was around like $25. So not as expensive as yours, but it was still up there.
Yeah.
And so we had to kind of go back and say, okay, with these conversion rates, this makes sense. And so it has to make sense, obviously, for the business. Like how long are people going to stay with this product? What's the overall like average contract value? And this also comes into your marketing expense. Where does this expense get covered? Is it from marketing side? Is it from the entire business's side? And so a lot of times it's like, well, we could spend, let's say, 100,000 on trade shows, or maybe we decide, okay, that 100,000 is going to cover, let's say X number of these free trials because we believe this from the marketing standpoint, this is going to be the best thing people could ever experience. And people will want this more than anything else. And it makes our offer more compelling. So that's like the two-pronged approach. Like, can we support it? Can we sustain it? And can we reduce the costs? And yeah, that's how I approach it without asking too many more detailed, specific questions to the anonymous person.
Who knows? No, that's a really good point. I think that you raise a really good point of where do we spend our money, and we do spend a lot in trade shows, and the conversion rate of a trade show is not 51%, right?
Totally.
So that's a really good
It's a
point.
51 conversion rate. It's like, maybe we just like apply everything there.
Yeah, just dump it all in.
Just start
Pour all
paying
the
people to
money
sign
in.
up for the trials.
That's right. I hope my CFO is not listening. Brilliant.
Cool. Did we cover all the components? Just want to make sure we
Yeah,
got
sorry,
all of
did
them into place.
No,
No.
that's first 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, sorry,
There's 6
sorry.
more, right? Like, let's go.
Sorry, I jumped
Stop
in.
interrupting me.
Take it away. Take it
I'm
away.
kidding.
This is so exciting. Okay, go.
It's a
so
good
exciting.
conversation.
Yes.
So phase 2,
Shh. Yes.
all about building a product that sells itself. And so the very first thing you got to do there is your offer. So is it an irresistible offer? Is it very clear why your product is 2, 5, 10x better than the competition? And can you identify what it is very quickly, like as soon as you go on that page and everything else? So like if that is not clear, you got to start there. That's the very first thing. Like too often, I will be talking to a founder who's working on like their free to paid conversion rate. And I'm like, oh yeah, we spent like 3 months working on our onboarding experience. I'm like, fantastic, but like, what do you do? Tell me. And then they tell me, and I'm like, oh, that's clear. But like, I honestly didn't get it from your website. And so if your offer is clear, you got to start there.
Yeah.
So that's step 4. Step 5 is actually the experience. Can we make it effortless for people to sign up, get to value, and upgrade? And so it's all about making it easy for everybody to do that. So that's really just like, how do we reduce friction? How do we make this easier for people to go through? Once you get that, then we can look at your pricing and how do we make it simple, transparent, and strategic so that people are able to sign up. And it might be for a $50 per month plan, but then you could grow them into a $1,000 per month plan as well. And so what are the value metrics you use there to make that happen? And so those 3 components in that order, like if you're focusing on your onboarding, but your offer's off or something like that, it's like you got to start at the top because it has the most leverage. And so those are the kind of next 3 that you got to go through to just build a product that sells itself.
Can I ask a question about pricing without derailing us too much?
Yeah,
Because pricing is an interesting one too. Because as part of our PLG motion, the pricing question comes up because we're one of those SaaS businesses who don't like putting a price on our pricing page because then we have to stick to that price, right? And there's a lot of customizations with enterprise and things like that. So it feels a little chicken and eggy of like, do you have a price first or do you let the PLG motion determine the price? Or like how do those 2 things interact with each other?
Yeah, so you do have to have some level of transparency if you're going to have it where it's like people can purchase on their own.
Of course, yeah.
But what most companies do, if they still have more of that enterprise sales-led motion, is they would have maybe an entry-level plan. So when I was working with Boomi, they're like a division of Dell, and that was like their CEO was like, we have to have a $50 per month plan. We must have that. So they had like a very basic, this is what's included. And if you want more, then you have to actually talk to us and we'll go through and see, okay, what does that look like? So that way you can still have the transparency of a pricing page where some people can get started. They don't feel like that's a shell shock, whatnot. Easy to get started. Back to that, it has to be easy to get started piece. And then it's like, okay, if you want more, let's have that conversation, make something custom.
Makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense.
And phase 3.
Phase 3, yeah, the last one. This one's all about how do you actually scale it up? And so what we identified is there's 3 things you have to have if you want to scale up your product-led motion a lot faster. And so the very first one is all about data. So do you understand at all times, like, what is the number one bottleneck in your business? And so many companies just don't. It's like, I'm kind of guessing. And it's when you break it down into like the 6 core stages of user journey, it's like, okay, we can see like, did they get stuck in the sign up stage? Did they get stuck up on like, the getting to value stage or the upgrade stage? Like where in that spectrum did they drop off? And so when we understand that, it will allow us to actually allocate our resources effectively. And so really basic stuff, but it's important. And I think most companies overcomplicate it. They're like, oh yeah, we're a SaaS company. We track everything. And it's like, but you're not tracking the easy stuff.
Also, I gotta admit, so I have a unnamed client in the US, Silicon Valley, a pretty big scale up SaaS, 300, 400 people or something, customer service app. And they have a mix, and they're trying to really scale up their PLG motion, and they have classic sales-led enterprise motion on the other side. So it's kind of like 50-50, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things they're struggling with, and we're trying to help them with a bit, is to kind of get like the metrics aligned. And I think that's one of my questions I want to ask you, because like, and I also feel personally that's hard, right? Because like you get metrics in like people that sign up for free trials and how do they convert at a later stage and how does the different cohorts convert in different segments, and then you have the sales led motion, and how do you differentiate between which one to invest in, like which one do you want more of. How do you usually go about that? Like do you have any examples where like, hey, anyway, any good tips or something on that?
Yeah,
I know it's hard because you don't know the inside of this case, but yeah, just in general.
Usually when we do that with clients, we always focus on like, where is the company going, and where is the majority of the focus where we want it to be? Because if we track everything and like, okay, here's our company level scorecard we review in our leadership meetings, and it's like, wow, not everything is going to get covered. You're not going to get the same level of detail. So once we identify like those 6 core stages, like we build out their company level scorecard. There's literally just a spreadsheet where we track the metrics on a weekly basis to see like, okay, where do we focus? And then if one of these is off, it's like, hey, like everybody, like whoever owns that metric, they become the CEO for the week.
Yeah.
They're like, they're showing everybody else like, hey, I need your help here. This is the core bottleneck of the business. Can we all rally and help each other? And so like, obviously they got other stuff there, but it really allows a lot of focus there. And so I wouldn't also think about like, how do we have like our sales led and product led one? I would try and see like, how could we integrate these? Yeah. And so, because there's huge value in like how they could support each other.
Definitely. It's not like we're not trying to separate. It's just like there has historically been a big sales, and now they're really trying to push for the other part too, right? Like that hasn't just been a thing, right? Like they haven't been that good at it. I think one question I want to ask, so on these metrics, like do you usually operate, like I'm a classic growth guy, sounds weird, but I'm a classic growth guy, so I used a lot of
so not a growth marketer or growth hacker?
I don't fucking know, man.
Growth hacker.
What's your label?
I used to be head of growth, right? So take it for what it is.
Easy on growth now. Easy.
My LinkedIn says growth hacker, but I haven't changed in ages. Anyways, I was curious about like North Star metric. Is that kind of like a principle you like? Do you use that in your KPIs, and then you trickle down to the 6 KPIs and stuff? Like, is that how you go about it and think about it in the same way? Or
that's actually one of the metrics.
Okay.
And so what's kind of fun about it is one of the metrics we track is like, okay, first value, did they get to first value? We call it a first strike, whatever. But then the next one is like key usage indicators. So that should happen before they ever become a paying customer, ideally, where it's like they've experienced the value like at least a few times. And then it's like upgrade. It's the next kind of metric. And so when we look at that key usage indicator, a lot of times that's actually a core component of the North Star metric. It's like, okay, what is that? Because your free user should also contribute to that North Star metric in an ideal world. And so once you identify that, it's like, oh, actually, we're pretty darn close to what this North Star metric is. Right? And so, big fan of that and unpacking what that is for companies.
Definitely. I always found that hard though. Like that question in itself, like getting to what is a North Star metric. I think I was looking what was it? The Dropbox original example was like, it wasn't the first file, it was like 3 files uploaded. Same with Twitter, like it was not the first message, it was the first 7 followers or something. And so how do you like it's not the 6 followers, the 7 followers, it makes it go. I always thought that was kind of interesting, like that whole data point. But
and I think most people overcomplicate it.
I think so too.
And it's like, just pick something.
Just pick something. There's a spike here, go for that one.
Pretty please.
Yeah, exactly.
Pick it.
But I think you're absolutely right. Like we just try to over-engineer it, and marketing people love doing that, right? So just pick something, start. My grandma would say, "Shit or get off the pot." Like do something, and then you figure out whether that's accurate or not.
We could get on a whole nother rant here of like, being data driven, and like, it's the hot thing, and it's like, please don't be data driven. Like, I feel like a lot of people
be driven.
That's use your intuition. It's telling you something too, and it's like, and it's okay.
I love that. What is because you were kind of alluding to it here. What's the biggest problem as you see, or like misconception around PLG? Because like, what's the biggest mistake maybe you see happening all the time?
Yeah, I think it's the foundation is never set. So they don't they go into it full force. And then they don't tie it into the strategy. So they don't get alignment from everybody on the executive team. Then they don't get crystal clear on like, who are they serving? What is the goal? What's success for this user? And they don't actually have a Super Mario level model that actually provides
that
value.
Old time, Wes. I'm stealing that 100%. I love it.
That's really good.
So those are the first big things. And like, they just slap on a free trial. They go to the offer experience. Even the experience, they don't really focus that much. And then the 2 other components I think are important, because like, here's what they do wrong too. eighth component is like our growth process. So are we launching experiments to actually improve this, attack that bottleneck? And so a lot of them are not. And so they launch this free experience, and then it's like we're doing everything on the marketing side, getting more signups, but then like who's doing onboarding? They're like, what's onboarding?
That's CS's problem, right? That's customer success,
our
right?
CS person knows what to do, I think.
It's like it's literally the CS person. It's just like, wait, what? Right? Yeah, the alignment.
Yeah. And that's usually like not where they invest a lot of the money in the business. And so it might not be the best person in charge for that. And then the last thing is like the team component, which is, okay, do we have the right people to take this business to the next level? And if you go through that wheel, the reason it's at the end is because it's like you should hire as a last resort at a product company because most of those problems are going to be solved by the product. It's only when you reach like certain issues where it's like our main bottleneck is signups, and it's been signups for a month. And we've done everything we can. We need to or we found a channel, let's say it's LinkedIn. It's like, we need to max this up. Like, let's hire the LinkedIn, person.
It's so
for
funny
that.
you mentioned this. I fucking love this.
Director.
It's like, I helped a really big corporation at some point, like very big, about this. And the first fucking question they asked me is like, who is it we need to hire? I was like, I don't fucking know, man. You're 50,000 people.
With PLG too. It's like, we need a head of PLG. We need a CPO. And I'm like, please stop.
They hired 10 people before they had a plan. They hired, they just went out and like hired. And I was like, whoa, calm down. Like, what are we doing here? Like, I love that you put it at the end, actually.
And when they do hire those people, like that head of PLG, they come in and they're like, oh, this person has worked at Atlassian. Whatever.
It's going to be great. Like, look at this. They've done it before.
They have so much experience. And then what they realize is like, they actually need that change manager to like, help out with that, change it. And it's like, it's not that person. They don't know. They just walked into this at that scale and it was already working. They don't understand what
they don't
working.
do it. That's the thing that I think, especially in like startup
and they have no
land.
street cred.
Exactly.
No, exactly. They have no, and typically they have no buy-in, right? Like there's no, I actually, I remember when I had to sell the idea of growth at Templify as a role, as a function, like an implement with PLG and stuff. I was like, I kind of explained it to management, like, you should see me as kind of like Batman. Because it's like, I'm going to do the right thing, but not everyone's going to love me. Like some people are going to hate me, but I'm going to do the right thing. And I love that.
And I think one of the ways we got around it too is, again, we did like free trial as like a stepping, can we automate this? Can we automate our qualification process? And I was the one running it. And I was like, I'm not going to be the Batman. I'm going to pull everyone in. So we did like a cross-functional task force where we had CS, product, growth, tech, sales, everyone in a room. And I was like, this is what I want. And then they're like, well, that's not going to happen, and then we kind of found this middle ground of where we could start. We made a decision. We found our metric. We were just like, fuck it, let's do something and let's get this ball rolling, and then we'll just make it better and better and better. And that helped a lot with the getting the buy-in, because when someone says, you're making CS's job harder, I point to my CS person. I'm like, you're in the room. You were there telling us how to make it better. So I don't know, that's really worked for us to try to keep everyone.
That's super underrated too. Like in all the times where it's worked really well, it's like we approach it cross collaboratively because it's cross collaborative.
Blame another marketing initiative that no one buys into. No, this is everyone's in the room and everyone's hopefully agreeing. And that's also when sales come and go, you're trying to cannibalize. Nope, your VP's in the room. He's on board. I check with him.
I wanna ask a question. Are we done with are we done fine? Is there one component missing?
No,
the team was done.
We got them all.
Good.
We're gonna have to write all of these down because we interrupted way too many times.
It's all good.
I at this event last week, and I think there was a really interesting one of the it was a VC guy, classic VC statement, but VC guy, and he was saying like he had an issue with PLG, and one of the issues he had, and I think that's actually actively maybe a good point, is that there's a lot of people chasing PLG, but very few actually achieve it. Like there's like, if you look at it, there's one Slack, right? There's one whatever, there's one Monday.com or one Dropbox and stuff. Why is it so? We talk a little bit about this, but with so many people chasing it, is it because it's not the right model for them? Is it because they do it wrong? Or why do you think that is? Maybe that's my question. Like, why do you think not more companies make it?
It's because PLG is only half the story. And people are looking at like the top of the iceberg where it's like, okay, you think of PLG, there's your model, there's your experience, how do you get people to value, and then there's your offer. And it's like they're kind of looking at those main things at the very top. But then everything below the surface is actually what it matters. And so I refer to that as the product-led organization, which is all those other components like your strategy, your team, the data, the process, all those other components are what support PLG and help you actually do that really well. And so your PLG motion will only be as good as your product-led organization. And so that's the limiting factor for most people where they're not thinking of this as an organizational thing. Yeah. And so that's what blocks them. They're like, why is my PLG motion not working? We're doing everything. And it's like, yeah, you just are not doing everything below the surface.
It's kind of like a mindset thing for me. Like, it's like you have to get the whole company on board this train, right? Like everybody has to think about that like 24/7 almost, right? Like to an extent.
And I think that's, as a company like us where we have, scale, mid-market enterprise and scale is the kind of PLG play, the small guys, the hopefully simple cases, right? And that's not a priority. The priority is these larger, higher LTV but the PLG does take a lot of resources. It takes time. It takes a shift in mindset. And that's sometimes where we struggle with the buy-in, right? Of why are we doing this when we have a lot of money on the table over here? So,
What's important too is the conviction and commitment from the CEO. Because if that's not there, it needs like a lot of time for it to work and prove out. And when you get it running, it'll the benefits will be self-explanatory, but it will not make sense for the first year, or sometimes even the second year.
Oh, shit. A year, huh?
So it's a long game, and you got to have that mindset.
In these last sort of 5 minutes, I don't know if we're going to get kicked out, so we'll just stay here until they kick us out.
20 minutes.
Last 10 minutes, keep going.
I guess maybe to kind of summarize everything that we're saying, but kind of what is the kind of is it the conviction? What is the one piece of advice for, say, the marketer or the product person or that lone voice who's like, guys, there's a better way to do this. How do we get them to get that ball rolling?
Read his book. No, I'm sorry.
That's what we did. That's what I was telling Wes, not to be a kiss ass, but I bought like 4 copies of the book and I was like, director of product, product manager, and I gave it out to everyone. And
I did the plug for you, Wes.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
I mean, education, I think, is the first thing. You got to get everybody on the same page. Yeah. But once you have everybody like, okay, this is where we want to go, the next key beginner milestone, back to what we were trying to do in our own dog food here, is what is the right path to go on and how is the best way to approach this? And that is the 9 components. Like, we've helped 324 plus SaaS companies now. And it's like, listen, when people don't do this or they do 5 out of the 9, like, it just doesn't work that well. Yeah. So please, like, just agree.
There's a process, man.
There's a process.
Yeah, trust the process.
Trust it, do it.
Yeah.
And it's such a good example. I feel like this is a life lesson in general too. Because it's the same whenever I deal with stuff, it's just like whenever they don't follow the process, it's shit.
Yeah, you half-ass
it. It never works.
Yeah.
Totally.
I love that.
And it's all free. So
it's all free.
Implement it yourself if you want.
I love it.
Brilliant.
I have one last question.
Sure.
So, and that's more like, because I always want to. So we talked a little bit about PLG, but in your career, like in general, as a person, if you could go back 5, maybe 10 years, I don't know what time frame works for you, but and teach yourself a thing, what would that be? Like, what if you had to go back maybe to your Vidyard days? Like, what would you say to yourself, and how would you go about it differently?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is be more intentional. That is the most underrated thing ever.
I love that.
And when it comes to being intentional about your learning, being intentional about how you invest every single minute of your time, it's like, how could I be more intentional? And I've only really feel like I started like becoming that in the last like year and a half. And it's like, had I done that for all that other time, man, game changer.
I totally get that. Yeah, I love it.
I love it. Fantastic. So, Wes, any parting words for our listeners, which are mostly marketers, but some product people out there too? But any last bits of advice or parting words?
Yeah, I think if you're seriously considering PLG, maybe it's a good time to just ask your C-level, how does this connect with our strategy? Start asking that question. How is this going to help us win? Because if you can't like change the strategy, you can get them to think about it so that they can then evoke that change, because they should see a very clear connection for every single department. Yeah. How is this going to impact us? And so sometimes you do have to prompt those questions. They're going to think, wow, this person's smart.
You got to plant the seed, right?
You said strategy.
Plant those seeds.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit like Inception, right? Like, you can't really force them to do it, but when you can plant the seed, and eventually they'll be like, "Yeah, PLG, I came up with that." I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead, buddy.
Great
actually
idea.
Great idea.
Great idea.
Let's do it,
idea.
boss.
Wow, great
so
idea,
smart.
boss.
Here's the framework.
Oh, that's so sad but true.
That's so sad but true, right?
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. This has been awesome. It's a long episode, but
I
I'm glad
learned
we just
so
kept-
much. Like, fuck
Yeah,
me,
we gotta
I learned
slow
so
it down
much.
at like half speed so I can take some notes. But this
Yeah.
is really great, Wes. Thank you
is
so much
great.
for taking the time. And
And good luck tomorrow at Sassiest,
yeah,
right?
Thank you.
Like for
Yes,
people
you as
listening,
well.
but we'll see Wes tomorrow.
Yes.
You're speaking tomorrow, or
Yes.
Yes, perfect.
nice. Yeah,
Awesome.
cool.
Cool. Thanks so much
All
for
right,
having
thank
me.
you.
Yeah, thank you, buddy.
Bye.
Bye.